name is Vic Valenti, and I am 47 years old. I have cerebral palsy, but I was not born with it because I was a healthy, normal baby up to my 14th month. When I was 14 months old, I had Reyes syndrome, and this syndrome caused my cerebral palsy. However, my doctors didn't know how I caught this, and now I feel so lucky to have cerebral palsy. My cerebral palsy has given me a very wonderful life. My parents recognized that I required some treatment on my muscles because I was stiff like a board. When my father came into our apartment, I somehow recognized his loud voice and funny accent and slightly moved my head towards him. When my parents saw me do this, they were so happy for me because it gave them the confidence that I would be able to do anything I wanted. The cerebral palsy damaged the cells in my brain that controlled my voice, so my speech-language pathologist and mother had a genius way for me to communicate. They cut pictures out of old magazines and pasted them on a small board. At this time, I wasn't that steady on my legs, so my speech-language pathologist and mother had to find an easy way for me to communicate to the world. R. When I was 2 years old, my mother wanted my father to get some stamps, so he decided to leave me in his car when it was running. You could guess what I did. Well, I locked every door and moved myself to the driver's seat and then started driving down Concession Street. My father rushed out of the store and tried to convince me to unlock the driver's side door. Unfortunately, I couldn't grab and unlock this door, so my father had to punch in one of the windows and quickly pulled the keys out because a big truck was coming down the street. He asked me to keep it a secret from my mother, but I immediately let the cat out of the bag. This was a little miracle to tell my mother about this thing, because I was using a very small set of pictures. My parents sometimes took care of one of my cousins, and at this time, when they were taking care of him, I was very great with my gestures. He thought that I could pat my pants when I was required to go to the bathroom, and my parents were so pleased that my cousin gave me this gesture to go to the bathroom. Right now, I am using modified American Sign Language, and you would not completely understand my modified American Sign Language because I am always using two hands. My parents always let me play outside when it was winter time. When I was attending the Cerebral Palsy Center, I was not allowed to go outside when it was winter time. But when I came home, I told my parents about this with my Bliss Simple board. My parents investigated this because I wore my snowsuit to school, but my friends didn't. Most of my friends were in wheelchairs, and our teachers didn't want them to feel left out when I was playing outside. When I was 7 years old, I got my largest Bliss Simple board because I had a lot of things to communicate to the world. This communication display had 713 symbols, and I remembered where they were because my teacher and mother tested me on my memory. Unfortunately, it was time for me to attend another school. Yes, I said unfortunately because this new school was just a babysitting school. Firstly, I wasn't allowed to go outside for recess because the rest of my friends were in wheelchairs and couldn't go outside without any assistance. Secondly, I wasn't allowed to eat with the rest of my friends because I wasn't a clean eater. Thirdly, I was made to wear a helmet when my class was taking gym. Lastly, our teacher wanted us to write letters to Santa Claus, but I knew that Santa Claus didn't exist and I refused to write this letter at what a rebel I was. The teacher slapped me for refusing to write Santa Claus a letter. Every time the school did something bad to me, I told my parents with my 713 symbols, and my parents pulled me out of this babysitting school when I got my hand slapped. My mother homeschooled me until my parents arranged with the board to let me attend a regular school. Just after attending this regular school, my parents and the board arranged for me to attend my neighborhood school with my friends. When I was in grade 3, I wanted to give up my bliss symbol board and use an alphabet board because my friends were spelling. My mother made an alphabet board for me, but it was small because I was a very active young boy who liked to go outside for recess. When I was ready to move on to a middle school, my mother had to make me a word board because I had to speak to my teachers a lot. It would save me time to speak to my teachers because my classes were short and my classmates and I had to walk around the school to get to each classroom. I had to ride in a taxi because I couldn't walk the distance to my middle school. One of my drivers used to smoke in his taxi, and of course, I told my mother about this driver because the smoke was not good for my asthma. In my first year of high school, I was prescribed to have a new communication device, but my speech-language pathologist didn't do her job to get this new communication device. Plus, my old speech-language pathologist had to move to the United States of America with her husband. My mother was pretty angry with my new speech-language pathologist for not doing her job, so she made a whole word board for the rest of my high school years. This word board let me get my thoughts out very quickly because I was required to communicate with my classmates and teachers. Plus, I didn't need to walk 2 different classes in a day, and my parents bought me a computer to use for writing for my classes. When I was 20 years old, my original speech-language pathologist came back to the clinic, and she recommended that I should get a communication device. I took her recommendation to get a communication device. But this communication device was basic because I had to type everything that I wanted to say. I was so happy to get a real voice to talk with my classmates and teachers, because I needed to say a lot to them. It was time to move on to college. I was required to get a computer for my college work. This computer had a synthesized voice, so I could use this computer to talk with my classmates and teachers at college. But this computer was basic and large, and I couldn't carry this computer to my classroom. My father had to build a tray for my scooter to hold the computer. However, I still had been using the communication device, and the government wanted me to pick one to use for my college years. This decision was so hard to pick one because I couldn't use the computer for my regular use to talk with my family and friends outside of college. In my first year of college, I had a chance to enter a contest, and this contest was a trip to an International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication conference, which was in Philadelphia. At this conference, I saw the best communication device print keyomic company at this time, so when I came back to Hamilton, I talked with my speech-language pathologist about getting this communication device. This communication device would replace my current computer and communication device. I do remember when I got my print keyomic company communication device, and it was on my 23rd birthday. I had to go into the clinic and pick my communication device up. I could immediately use the sequences to make my sentences because I have high cognitive skills. These high cognitive skills were a must to use this type of communication device because my communication device was very complicated to use. My speech-language pathologist had to teach me how to use the sequences to get words. We had bi-weekly appointments, and my speech-language pathologist gave me a set of words to learn. She didn't have to teach me the pronouns and the main verbs because I was constantly using these words to communicate with my parents, teachers, and friends. One of my great college friends didn't like the voice on my communication device, so he tried to change the voice. I just laughed at him to change my communication device's voice because he was a techie and I knew he couldn't break my communication device. When I was communicating with my different boards, I didn't like people to finish my sentences for me. One of my friends loved his friends to finish his sentences when he was communicating with his different boards. I felt it was very rude when adults tried to finish my sentences because in the real world, I noticed that the people wouldn't finish other people's sentences. When I was also communicating with my different boards, my teachers and classmates would never ever finish my sentences because my mother told my teachers to not finish my sentences. My classmates knew that they mustn't finish my sentences. However, one of my uncles couldn't completely and totally understand what I was saying to him because he had a learning disability. My mother and grandmother would always come over and translate what I was telling him. This was perfectly okay with me because I loved him so much. My parents taught me that family is everything to us. When I received my first electronic company communication device, my friends and family didn't finish my sentences because they knew it would be very rude. But I slowly realized that when I had been talking with little children, they are required to finish my sentences. Their little brains are still developing, and their language skills are still developing. Over the past few years, I have been volunteering at different schools, and these little children have taught me a lot about how their minds work when I have been communicating with my communication device. In the middle of my college years, I decided to get my driving license, and I went into a regional office to get my license. I gave my information to the office, and I didn't hear anything from them for a whole year. A letter came through the mail, but this letter was for my father, and the government pulled his license because they thought that he had a disability. My mother had to call my father immediately because he was driving back to our house on Highway 401, and he had to call a government office to fix his problem. They believed that he was me because we have the same name, but we are born on 2 different days. Plus, we have our names spelled different. His name has a K and mine has a C, and I have a middle name and he doesn't. This is a very funny thing, because I had to use my communication device to talk with the government regional office, and they pulled my father's license because of the mistaken identity between him and me. For the past 9 years, I've been speaking to different schools about people with disabilities. I hope my presentations help the children learn how to accept people with disabilities in their lives. When I